But the thing that bothers me about this YouTube policy in particular, is the only barrier to any government, our government, any government, becoming an authoritarian regime. The only real barrier at the end of the day, it's not a rule, a law in a book. It's not a constitutional sentence. The only real barrier at the end of the day is the vigilance of the citizenry. And questioning the legitimacy of government processes is exactly what free people ought to do. It's like totally necessary for us to have people questioning the legitimacy of government processes. Even if the skeptics are wrong, you need the skeptics. You need to allow for and invite skeptics of things. You need to allow people to ask questions of the legitimacy of the processes, every process, the legitimacy of the court system, the legitimacy of the police. I mean, I know this might trigger some people, but the legitimacy of wars that we're in, the legitimacy of voting, all of it should be questioned, all of it. That's how you keep a government from growing into an out of control authoritarian regime with no response, like with detached from responsibility, with no means of reeling them in, with no accountability whatsoever. The way that you keep a government from moving into this authoritarian no accountability scenario is by inviting skeptics to examine everything all the time. That's one of the barriers to that. The moment that you say, I mean, by the way, skeptics will be wrong sometimes. They'll say this was the problem and it wasn't. That's okay. Like the moment you ban that conversation, you are rolling out the red carpet for authoritarians. That's what you're doing. You're doing that. And a private media company like YouTube, I get that they're private. I get that they're not a government agency, but a private media company like YouTube that implements a policy that enforces only the official narrative that everything's hunky-dory and the government process is beautiful and how dare you question it, that's not really any different than a government-owned media platform, right? YouTube, they're not being paid by the government to be the Ministry of Propaganda, right? They're not a paid soldier in the cultural war, but they're a volunteer. They're volunteering to be the Ministry of Propaganda on behalf of the government. And that should scare you. That is, I think, one of the most dangerous things. And we don't have, in the one sense, people will say like, oh, well, we have a free press because the government's not in control of the press. And we have free press because, Facebook and YouTube are independent. And that's all true. They are, sort of. There's some nuance there because of funding and where they get, where they get money for things and regulation and blah, blah, blah. But that's all true. But they become de facto extensions of the state when they take a position, which is what the state says is 100% correct. And if you question it, you're banned. We won't allow questioning the narrative on our platform. There's really no practical difference between that and a Ministry of Propaganda. Other than that, you can leave those platforms, go to other platforms, build other platforms, go elsewhere, which you can't really do with Ministry of Propaganda, which is important to do. I don't want people to start looking at YouTube and thinking, oh, this is now a platform where we can keep the government honest. It's not. It's not a platform where we can keep the government honest. It's not a platform where you can question authority. It's not a platform where you can ask hard questions. It's not. It's a platform where you can skirt around difficult issues without saying anything too outside the mainstream. And you can have cat videos and you can entertain people with jokes and you can have makeup videos, but you can't do anything that might damage the oligarchical relationship between big tech and a big brother federal government. You can't.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's what pisses me off about this.
Well, they don't even see the connections between, when I talk to people who are deeply in the echo chamber, it's almost impossible to have a conversation because you're in two versions of reality. They don't even know the facts. They don't know any of the facts, and they're happy not being able to get access to the facts. And they don't even know, like there was a leftist who came into my comments who I hadn't heard from in a couple of years. and came into my comments a couple nights ago to talk about this YouTube thing, the censorship thing. And she's not a liberal. She's squarely SJW, leftist, authoritarian, happy with censorship, happy with violence, whatever. But she thinks she's a liberal, A. So how do we even bridge that gap of understanding? Words don't mean things to her. And B, she's arguing, well, private companies can do what they want. Well, yeah, nobody's disagreeing with you here. I certainly wasn't. Right. They misunderstand. They confuse morality with legality. So they say, well, if I think it's immoral, then it should be illegal. That's why they contradict themselves all the time. That's why they will simultaneously say you must be forced to bake the cake because I think it's immoral, and it should be illegal because I think it's immoral. You should have to bake the cake. But then when it comes to censorship of opinions they don't like, they'll say the opposite. They'll say, oh, private companies can do what they want. Really? Right. I thought they had to bake the cake. It's because they don't view the censorship as immoral, and therefore they don't think it should be illegal. But that's not a person who's principled. They don't have principles. So I don't know how to those kind of conversations are almost pointless. And I don't even bother to get into, like with this person, I didn't even bother to get into, because they were trying to say, as long as it's not by the government, censorship's fine. Like, okay, first, I disagree with you there. But secondly, they do work in collusion with the government. I'm not even going to go there because we can't even talk about this other stuff. So why even go there? But they do work with the government. What world are you living in?
Yeah. And this is the other thing. Like, when I'm criticizing YouTube here, I'm telling all of us to voluntarily, I mean, look, it's a long process to do what we do on a platform other than YouTube. I know we get a lot of recommendations. You should be on this. You should be on that. Blah, 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 blah. I appreciate all of them. No other platform has super chats, live streaming, can do the things that, like, no other platform does what YouTube does. None. Not BitChute, not Library, not anyone. No one does what YouTube does. It's not simple to move platforms. However, we are working on it because we know someday we'll probably be banned from YouTube. But my point is, we need to start doing that. Places like Unsafe Space and other wrong thinkers need to start shifting. And I'm happy people are leaving Facebook and going to MeWe and leaving and going to Parler and like exiting Twitter and going to those. Like, that's all good. When you criticize YouTube, I'm not saying the government should force YouTube to not have this policy. Like, I just think we shouldn't respect or like the policy. It's a dangerous policy that we should recognize as such. If YouTube magically changed their tune on this stuff and decided to be a free speech platform, great, we'd stay. And we're going to stay as long as we can. Like, people keep saying Rumble. Rumble does not have the features that you think it has, but I appreciate it. But they are working on it. I heard just this week that they're trying to. I know, but don't be such a downer. Like, yes, we are going to try Rumble, and maybe they will be the ones that develop live streaming. Yes. You can't say there's nothing worth. Okay. I'm not saying there's nothing worth. We're on Library. Right. We're on BitChute. I've had conversations with the CEO of Library about this particular thing. I also ran engineering teams. And so when someone says we're working on blah, 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 I don't put a lot of faith in that until I see some progress. Like, everyone's working on blah, 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 right?
But
and Bongino bought Parler. So he might roll Rumble into Parler, which is where you might actually see this stuff. If I were him, I might try and integrate those platforms in some way. Because doesn't he own Rumble too, I think? I'm not sure. So. But yeah, no, absolutely. There's other platforms and we like other platforms. But my point about the other platforms isn't that we'll never go there or that they're not, like, maybe Rumble will be the thing in the future. That's totally possible. It's just that nothing is right now, which is why we're still on YouTube.
Right.
So that's all.